You've seen the clips, you've seen the takes, and right now, George Pickens is at the center of a mess people are calling a saga. Some voices on social media and sports radio are flat out saying he's not worth a long-term check. No heart, doesn't show up unless targeted, and even comments about him being a bad teammate. I want you to step back with me for a second and just listen to the way this argument is being framed, because there's a lot packed into those sound bites. First, outrage spreads fast. When a broadcaster or influencer says, "Don't pay him," that headline gets reactions, clicks, and instant judgments. That's the environment Pickens woke up to. But your job, and mine as I walk you through this, is to separate the hot takes from the reality. Let's be clear. People are arguing two different things at once. One side is pointing at flashes, a slow-motion shot, a play where he seemed disengaged, a moment where the body language didn't match the highlight reels. Those moments fuel a narrative about effort and attitude, and they resonate because fans care about grit as much as talent. The other side is counting production, yards, touchdowns, and how his numbers compare to other receivers who got paid. Those two frames, narrative versus numbers, are rarely in the same sentence when debates get heated, and that's why this feels messier than it should. I'm not trying to defend everything Pickens does or excuse visible lapses, but I also don't want you to throw away context. There are injury reports, calf and knee things mentioned in the background, and moments when a player's body and instincts react to what he's just seen on the field. That matters. Now let me ask you directly, before you make up your mind, which matters more to you, the stat sheet or the film on a single night? Vote in the poll on this video. Stat sheet or film and effort. Drop a quick comment with the word keep or cut and why. I'll read the best takes in the next video. If you want to keep seeing this kind of breakdown and don't want to miss the next chapter where we dig into the numbers versus the narrative, hit subscribe and help us reach 17,000 subscribers. And while you're at it, like this video so more fans see the debate. Let's walk into the part of this conversation that almost everyone ignores when emotions start flying: the numbers. Because when you pull the emotion out of it, when you step away from the noise and look at what George Pickens has actually produced on the field, the story gets a whole lot harder to dismiss. You heard the comparisons in the original rant, and they weren't exaggerated. Pickens is sitting on a season that outpaces what several highly paid receivers have done in their best years. And I want you to really picture that for a moment. In a league built on production, where a front office will pay a premium for a guy who moves the chains, Pickens is already stacking up seasons that eclipse players who were given long-term deals. Think about the Michael Gallup comparison for a moment. Gallup had one peak year early in his career, and the Cowboys still paid him after back-to-back seasons where he was trending downward. They invested in potential instead of consistent production. Meanwhile, Pickens is producing right now. He's scoring. He's putting up yardage that a lot of WR2s simply don't touch. Even with the criticisms floating around him, even with questions about effort or focus, the raw output paints a completely different picture from the social media version of his career. And this isn't me trying to romanticize anything. I'm not here to sweep flaws under a rug. I'm talking strictly about measurable impact. Yards, touchdowns, how he performs relative to the rest of the team, and how he stacks up against other wide receivers across the league. If you strip names off the jerseys and just hand someone the stats, a lot of fans would be shocked by how high Pickens sits in certain categories this year. That's the disconnect. People are debating personality while the data is screaming productivity. This is where you come in. I want to hear from you. Do numbers matter more than emotional frustration for you when deciding if a guy deserves to get paid? Tell me in the comments right now whether you're leaning, yes, he deserves to get paid, or no, the attitude outweighs the stats. And if you want more deep dive breakdowns like this, hit subscribe and help us get to 17,000. Your support tells me to keep bringing you these layered conversations, not just the surface-level stuff that gets tossed around on social media. Now let's get into the part of the debate that fuels the strongest reactions: the attitude concerns. This is the section where most fans draw their line in the sand, because effort and body language hit people in a place the stat sheet can't reach. When someone like Mark Schlereth goes on national radio and says he wouldn't invest a dime in Pickens past this season, that soundbite spreads because it taps into that old-school belief that wide receivers need to look hungry on every snap. And when Pickens has moments where he looks disengaged, especially when the ball isn't coming his way, that becomes the clip people replay to make their point. But let me walk you through a perspective that often gets left out. Football isn't played in a vacuum. Players don't move like robots. They carry emotion, injury, adrenaline, doubt, and whatever happened the play before. When a receiver watches a teammate take a brutal hit, when that receiver sees hands lock up in a way that signals neurological trauma, that sticks with him. You saw the commentary about Pickens hesitating over the middle after watching a frightening moment with a teammate. And if you've ever stepped onto a field, even at a low level, you know your brain replays those images long after the whistle. That doesn't excuse low effort, but it explains why a player might throttle down on a route that normally gets him lit up by the safety. And the truth is, the narrative around Pickens as a bad teammate does not match everything coming out of the building. There have been stretches where coaches and players have talked about solid chemistry. There have been weeks where his blocking, his physicality, and his focus were praised. That nuance gets overwritten quickly when one viral clip paints him as uninterested. One night becomes a label. One stretch becomes a personality profile. Fans love a clean storyline, even if it erases context. This is where the conversation needs balance. You're not wrong to want effort from your receivers. You're not wrong to want a guy fully engaged, even when he's not the first read. But you also can't take isolated moments and pretend they define an entire career. If Pickens consistently showed the same body language week after week, that would be one thing. But when you're looking at a handful of moments wrapped in a storm of online outrage, it's fair to question whether the criticism is matching reality. Let me ask you this directly. When you judge a player's attitude, what carries more weight for you? Teammate testimony or the television clips that go viral? Drop your answer in the comments and let's see where most fans land on this. And before we shift into Chapter 4, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't yet. We're aiming for 17,000, and your subscription is what keeps these deeper conversations alive on the channel. Now, let's turn to the bigger picture that many people overlook: what the Cowboys' wide receiver room actually looks like without someone producing at George Pickens' level. Because it's easy to say, just move on from him, until you lay out what moving on really means. History tells you something important about this franchise. When Dallas rolls with only one true top-tier receiver and a cast of supporting players behind him, the offense tightens up. You saw it after Amari Cooper was shipped out. CeeDee Lamb had to shoulder an enormous workload, and the next best option was Noah Brown, with numbers that wouldn't scare any defensive coordinator. The spacing changed, coverages compressed, third downs got harder, explosive plays dried up, and that wasn't a one-year fluke. Even in the following season, when the offense was running well, the gap between Lamb and Brandon Cooks was massive. Cooks gave them key moments, but he wasn't a true counterpunch. Defenses still tilted heavily toward Lamb, and Dallas survived that imbalance only because the quarterback and play design elevated the unit week after week. But it was never a sustainable long-term formula, and you felt it whenever the offense hit a wall. This is why dismissing Pickens because of a bad game or a bad moment misses the bigger truth. A productive WR2 is not a luxury in today's NFL. It is a requirement if you want to keep defenses from suffocating your scheme. And Pickens isn't just any potential WR2. He's on track this season to double the production of some of the receivers who previously held that role in Dallas. That's not speculation. That's not projecting upside. That is literally where his numbers sit right now. When someone is giving you yards, touchdowns, red zone presence, downfield threat ability, and a matchup problem for cornerbacks, you don't just replace that with optimism. You need a real plan. That's where the conversation gets serious. If you say no to paying him, fine. But what's the alternative? Rolling back the years where Lamb was the entire passing game? Hoping a late-round pick turns into something more? Pretending a bargain bin signing becomes a star? Fans often say, "Don't pay him," as if better options are lined up right outside the door. They're not. Productive wideouts either get paid by the team that developed them or shipped off for real capital, and the cost goes up every season. And this is where I want your take. If Pickens walks, and you could only choose one path, which would you take? Trust a rookie to fill that WR2 role, or pay a veteran on the open market even if it means overpaying a little? Drop your vote in the comments. And before we shift gears into the closing chapter, make sure you're subscribed. Hitting that button helps us move closer to 17,000 subscribers, and it keeps you right here every time we break down these big conversations around the Cowboys. When you zoom out and look at everything surrounding this Pickens conversation, you start to see just how quickly narratives form and how easily they run away from the truth. One national voice questions his effort, and suddenly the entire league is acting like this is someone who hasn't produced, hasn't battled through injuries, and hasn't shown flashes of high-end talent. One rough night gets replayed over and over until people forget the dozen nights where he was exactly the kind of receiver teams spend years trying to find. And when you pair that with the fear that comes from watching a teammate get hurt in a terrifying way right in front of you, the picture becomes far more complicated than the surface level takes that dominate the airwaves. That's really the point here. Fans deserve honest conversations, not emotional overreactions. If the Cowboys ever found themselves in this situation, you'd want the evaluation to be grounded, not driven by highlight reels of frustration or hot takes built for clicks. Wide receivers play one of the toughest emotional positions in the sport. They are dependent on play design, quarterback trust, opportunity, and sometimes pure luck. Their body language doesn't always tell the whole story, and their best value rarely shows up in the one clip people tweet into oblivion. Teams that stay patient, communicate directly, and manage players with clarity tend to get the best out of them. And it all comes back to the same question I'd ask you one-on-one. Does talent paired with production deserve patience? Or do you believe attitude concerns outweigh everything else? There's no wrong answer, but the debate tells you where you stand as a fan, whether you value ceiling or stability, whether you're willing to ride out rough stretches to reap the reward, or whether you prefer the safety of a cleaner profile even if the upside drops. So drop your closing thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you land because this topic splits the fan base every time it comes around, and your perspective helps shape what we dive into next. Before we wrap, let me remind you to subscribe if you haven't yet. Every new subscriber moves us closer to that 17,000 mark and keeps this community growing strong. And if you found this breakdown valuable, tapping the like button is the easiest way to tell YouTube to show it to more Cowboys fans just like you.